But later photographs tell a different story. They bear out his painful awareness of being much less than handsome. His large nose, the thick spectacles he had to wear on account of his short-sightedness, his increasing tubbiness, and his unusually long legs. All these characteristics he caricatured. There was an old man of Dunblane whose legs made him look like a crane. Again and again, his feelings of dysmorphia are lampooned in his published limericks, and the illustrations that accompany them, many of them featuring noses of various shapes and sizes, all being put to very strange purposes. Freud would doubtless have interpreted these gross appendages as unconscious phallic symbols, the products of a sexually repressed man. And I suspect he wouldn't have been far wrong from the mark. There could also be a link here, an interesting link, with his epilepsy. He referred to his epilepsy as the demon, aware of the ancient idea that epilepsy was due to demonic possession. The first seizures began when he was only 6, and they persisted all his life, and they could be quite frequent. There must have been some family predisposition, because his sister Jane was also epileptic. In Edward's case, he normally had an aura warning him that an impending attack was coming, so he could slip away to his room and have it in secret. This was very important to him because he was bitterly ashamed of his fits and was always anxious that no one outside the immediate family should know about it. Anne seems to have imparted to him the prevalent Victorian notion that the fits were due to self-abuse. And she says that the only cure, she assured him, was to stop it. But of course he couldn't. So, as the fits continued, guilt was added to shame. His lifelong determination to keep his epilepsy a terrible secret may well have enhanced his obsession with his nose. One doesn't have to be a Freudian to see that this could well have been due to an unconscious fear that his dong would betray things that he wished to keep hidden. Growing up in an exclusively feminine milieu, with no father, no schoolmasters, no schoolboy friends to act as male role models at critical periods during his development, Lear's sexual orientation was experienced in relation to members of his own sex at a time when homosexuals were regarded as degenerate criminals. This was yet another guilty secret that he had to carry. And really, it's not surprising that bearing such a load of guilt and self-disgust, he knew much unhappiness and was prone to severe episodes of depression. He called these the morbids, and the only cure for the morbids he found was work, friendship, and travel. For much of his life, Lear was constantly on the move, usually in the company of a handsome younger man, slogging from country to country over primitive roads and tracks, drawing and painting as he went, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 pictures a day. And of course, because he earned his living as a topographical painter, he had naturally to travel to find new subjects. But there was a kind of compulsive quality to this constant activity, as if it was the only way in which he could find peace. He wrote, "I hate life unless I always work." So what would Jung have made of all this traveling? To Jung, the journey was a symbol. It symbolized the natural course of the human life cycle and the stages through which we all pass as we travel from the cradle to the grave. But more than that, it embodied the notion of a spiritual quest. But what was the purpose? Jung believed that for each of us, the journey represents the quest for self-realization, to become as complete a human being as, given our personal history, it lies in our power to become. To Jung, the overriding purpose of the journey was to become whole. One travels in search of what is felt to be lacking. In Lear's case, what was lacking? The reassurance of being loved, freedom from shame and guilt, finding a kind of self-acceptance which could tolerate his epilepsy, his ugliness, his homosexuality, and his feelings of being different. Ultimately, he was in quest of paradise, a paradise that he could inhabit and celebrate in paint. There were moments when he felt he'd found it in Corfu, though sometimes he despaired of being able to do it justice. He wrote in his diary, "Can I give no idea of this paradise island to others?" Special places on the island became sacred for him, as they did for another Englishman, Lawrence Durrell, with his little chapel on a rock beside the sea, nearly a century later. Sacred spots for Lear were the bays and cliffs and beaches of Paleokastritsa, the olive-clad hills around Horepiscopi, the monastery of Nymphes, and the view towards the old fortress from Epilepsy, which he drew and painted at least 15 times. Lear's biographers have given informed opinions about what it was that Lear was searching for on his travels. Vivian Noakes subtitled her biography, "The Life of a Wanderer," and she believed his search was essentially for love. She wrote, "His search wasn't for physical love, but for someone who would want him as a person in the way that his parents had not wanted him as a child. What he was searching for and never found was real spiritual involvement with another person." Also, having examined the evidence in detail, another of his biographers, Susan Chitty, agreed that Lear's love for young men was probably platonic. She wrote, "His endless stream of amiable travelling companions, all under 25 or 26, mostly graduates of Oxford or Cambridge, were all dear to him at one time or another." Altogether, she counted 13 of them and named them. The men who attracted him invariably possessed the beauty and confident male assurance that he felt himself to lack. And with no one was this more true than with Frank Lushington. This was the great love of Lear's life, and the reason why he initially came to settle in Corfu. Frank Lushington was 10 years younger than Lear, a handsome 26-year-old, when they met in 1849 and together made a 6-week tour of the Peloponnese. He was a talented and well-connected barrister, and he was appointed in 1855, under the British administration, to the post of judge at the Supreme Court of the Ionian Islands in Corfu. And when he took up the post, Lear went to Corfu with him, having originally been invited by Sir George Bowen, the president of the Ionian University. And I believe we have with us this evening Sir George's great-granddaughter.